Okay, Kartika, you're the host again.
Now I got the control. Yeah, I'm making.
Oh my God, now we lost sir. Is sir here?
Uh,
He's not.
everybody got logged off, right?
Yeah,
Here
because
he is. He's here.
Yeah, yeah. Now.
He's here.
Yeah.
Here.
So he's host now. Yeah.
So now can I share my sir?
yes, sir. You should be able to share your screen now, sir.
Oh, okay, now it's possible. Yes, correct. Yeah. Yeah. Can you see that?
Yes, sir. We can hear you.
Yeah.
Again,
You can-
please requesting everybody to please mute your mics before we start the thing. Please, everybody, please be attentive and please be considerate. Make sure your mics are muted before sir starts talking. Thank you.
Yeah. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes, sir, we can.
Oh, okay. Okay. So let me start my presentation then. Yeah. Yeah. Respected Bhavani Madam, Sarala Madam, and all participants of this program. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
جالب این در مورد طبیعت کرلا میخواد بگه گوار بزن کنار ببین یاد بگیر
Mr.
can hear me
Inayat,
now?
please mute your mic. Thank you.
Yeah. So today I will be presenting on biodiversity conservation and management in Indian culture and tradition. I am basically I was a senior scientist in Kerala Forest Research Institute, located in Pichi, Thrissur. Now still I am attached with the Forest Research Institute as an expert in a National Medicinal Plant Board funded project to Kerala Forest Research Institute. As all of you know, in India, we can see a diverse variety of plants and animals. Although we are having just 2.4% of total land area of the world, we are having about 9.13% of world's known plant diversity. So, among these plants, many are endemic to India. That means they can be seen in natural condition only in India. So that is the interesting feature of Indian vegetation. And this is mainly because we have diverse physical features and climatic conditions. Physical features starting from coastal belt to high Himalayan region. The same way climatic condition, different climate, temperate and tropical climatic conditions we can see here. So we can see different types of ecosystems like wetlands and mangroves in the coastal area. Then forest, different types of forest. Say for example, in Kerala, we can see a deciduous forest, evergreen and semi-evergreen forest, shola forest in high range area. Then we also have in India grasslands, both in South India, like adjacent, like in Idukki and other area, Munnar and other area, grasslands we can see associated with the shola forest, and also in north western. And we have desert ecosystems also. So with all these kinds of ecosystem, different types of diverse type of ecosystems, we sustain high biodiversity altogether. Some species may be restricted to shola forest, some may be to desert area, but in total we have rich biodiversity, and they are contributing much to our human well-being. For example, you can see the plant Arogya Pacha. It is a well-known medicinal trichopods, it's called botanical name. It's a well-known plant in our in Kerala. We can see having a lot of medicinal values. The same way we have different types of food crops and fruit items. And apart from vegetation and food items, we are also having different ethnic groups. Each one is having its own what you call food habit culture, and other aspects. So that means again, diversity in India is also reflected in the form of ethnic groups and culture. And we also depend on plants for several things, like food items. So many food species we can see in India, we are consuming that. The same way fruit species, both cultivated fruit species and non-cultivated, means wild fruit species can be seen here. And we are rich in medicinal plants also. More than 4,000 species are known for their medicinal values in India, and they are being used particularly in Ayurveda system and other Indian systems of medicine. And we also depend on plants for fodder, green leaf manure, and fuel wood. Even for our cultural activities, we depend on plants. For example, this is a wall painting in Kerala. And for making or creating this kind of wall painting, plants are used. No synthetic paints are used here. For example, we know a plant called Kadukka in Malayalam. It's called Terminaria chebula. It is used for plastering the wall first. The same way we have a chunnambu only for plastering. And for getting green color, we use Nilamari and Irivi. The same way for black color, we can use yellow. And for making brush, painting brush, we can use this grass, Aristida cetacea. And bamboo is used for making or drawing outlines. Coconut water and this what you call Azadirachta indica or Arivepu, they are used for making the glue, and then over the painting we can make a coat of that one. So like this, plants are used even for making traditional wall painting. So with all this way, we are using our plant resources, but at the same time, plant diversity and richness are continuing in India. If it is it was in other countries, probably it would not have been there. But in India, it is still, we have rich plant diversity, and we are still using them. This is mainly because our traditional societies, they have recognized the interlinkages between human society and natural ecosystems. And at the same time, we also know that we have to conserve our plant resources for the well-being of future generations. And so I can say there are 4 ways or 4 approaches for plant conservation in Indian culture. One is restraint in resource exploitation. That means controlled use of resources, bioresources. Then we have an attitude of gratitude and respecting our nature. That is there as a part of our culture. Then we manage plant diversity and animal, mainly plant diversity, not only in what you call forested areas, natural forest area, even in other areas, we are conserving them. I will explain that part in greater detail, taking an example of Sacred Grove. So this way we are managing biodiversity both in forest area and outside forest area. Then we also know that we have to share our species among ourselves, thereby they can be conserved and utilized properly. So that means there is a transfer of useful species among the households, particularly women are playing very important role. Village women are playing a very important role in transferring or exchanging useful species. Thereby they can be conserved, and at the same time they can be sustainably utilized. So in my presentation with this background, I will take 2 examples, then explain how our tradition is conserving or has been conserving plants diversity. One with an example from forest ecosystem, and another one is from agro ecosystem or agriculture system. In for forest ecosystem, taking sacred groves, what we call Sarpa Kavu in Kerala, or sacred forest in some area, and this represents patch of forest protected by assigning them as the adobe of god or goddess. That means there is a temple in the center and surrounded by a good natural vegetation. So this is very common in Kerala. More than 2,000 this kind of sacred groves are there in Kerala. And not only in Kerala, you can see they are survived under a variety of ecological situations in India. For example, in Darjeeling Hills, they call this as a Daireli. And in Khasi Hills and Jaintia Hills in Meghalaya, they call Lakant. And in Bihar and Madhya Pradesh, it's called Saran. And even in Rajasthan, in desert area, we can see small forest patches, and they represent with a temple or with the idol of a god or goddess. It's called Varan. Same way in Maharashtra, we can see Devrais. And in Karnataka, they are called Devarkadu. And in Tamil Nadu, they are called Kovil Kadu or Kavu. And in Kerala, they are known as Sarpakavu. Or Yakshi Kavu, like that. Kavu, in general, it's called Kavu. So like this, we have sacred groves in different parts of India. And they are species-rich systems. For example, in 1998, we conducted a study in Iringol Kavu. It is in near Ernakulam. There, it's a 10-hectare sacred forest or sacred grove. There we recorded 54 tree species. Then Dr. Induchudan studied about 364 sacred groves in Kerala long back in 1998, and he recorded about 721 flowering plants from a total of about 1.44 square kilometer area. And in 2008, Dr. Warrior studied about 1,128 sacred groves with about 687 species. Then again, in 2011, I selected 28 sacred groves selected by Kerala Forest Department and investigated angiosperm or flowering plant diversity there, and I recorded about 670 species. And one interesting feature I wanted to mention here is more than 50 rare and endangered plant species of Meghalaya are seen only in sacred groves. More rare endangered species, but they are almost in the verge of extinction, but they are conserved in sacred groves of Meghalaya. And another important thing is not only the number of species, even what we call endemic species or rare species. How many are there? That is very important. That will indicate the health of a forest ecosystem. And more than 33% of total tree species in sacred groves are endemic to Western Ghats. The same way, I recorded about 20.5% species as endemic. And there are many rare threatened species which are recorded by Nair 1996, and they are all in red listed category. And we have seen them in some of the sacred groves in Kerala. The same way, threatened species are reported from Kerala sacred groves. Not only flowering plants or larger plants, even when you take non-flowering plants like fungi, soil fungi, which are very important for managing soil fertility. And they are also rich in both number as well as quantity density in sacred groves. So we have a report regarding this one. Then there are many what you call genetic resources which are very important for our biotechnology. So sacred groves are gene pool gardens for in situ conservation of genetic resources, because once they are there, they can be taken for further biotechnological intervention and developing new varieties and new crops. So in Kerala, we have recorded about 63 species which are wild relatives of cultivars, like maybe, for example, paddy and other species which we are using. So wild varieties are there, and they are very important because they are all resistant to many diseases, and we have to conserve them and utilize them whenever it is required. And apart from plant diversity, sacred groves are the centers of culture and eco folklore. One simple example is, in almost all sacred groves, and particularly in northern Kerala, there is a program called Kaliyatam during May to November. And this is a performing art conducted during the nights every year in May to November. And we can see different types of Tayam. So that means again, there is a diversity in Tayam. And they act, they are not just art, they actually act as counselor and advisor of the village. So if you have any problem, you can go in front of that Tayam, and it will console you, and it will also give good advice for your well-being. So this is the linkage between sacred grove and our biodiversity plus cultural diversity or religious activities. So after that, I will be going to agro ecosystems. So now I have completed sacred groves. Now I'll talk about agro ecosystems. So I give one example here. This is Muduva tribes of Kerala. This is a primitive tribe in India. And here, what interesting feature I saw is that they sow the seeds of different species and more than one cultivars of a crop together. It is not like in our other village, in our local villages, we can see paddy means only paddy cultivation. Coconut means only coconut. Aracanut means only aracanut. Rubber means only rubber. But here it is not like that. They sow the seeds of different crops together, and then when we asked them why you are doing like this, they say that suppose if something happened to one particular crop, other will be there, and we can harvest them and use them. If we have monoculture system, then it will affect our food availability. So that's why we are having this kind of system. Then you can see here very interesting feature like finger millets. Finger millet means ragi is called, and even ragi there are different cultivars like Akkini, Karimutti. They know all these things, and they know the feature of each species. They can not species, cultivars. These are all cultivars. Within the ragi, there are different cultivars. They know each one very well, and what is its feature, how it look, and where it should be planted, or when we can get the yield. And they sow the seeds of this one. And they say, suppose untimely heavy rain is there in the first week of December, this Putalashi and Arakku, the ragi, so they start flowering, or grains start germinating there itself. That means they will not get any yield. But there is another cultivar called matti. It will not get damaged because of heavy rain or untimely rain. So that means they can harvest the grains of it. Although
Baker, will you please mute your mic, please? It's constantly going on. And all participants, can you please be aware that your mics are going on randomly? Baker, please mute your mic. Thank you.
Yeah, madam, you are hearing me, no? Probably.
We're hearing you. It's just that some people accidentally
Yes.
going
Yeah,
on.
right. Okay.
Distracting to the rest of us.
Correct.
It's very interesting, your talk. I'm really apologize for the
No, it's okay. No, there is no. Yeah. So now I will give another example. So this is the traditional, what you call our tribal agro ecosystem, where they are having this kind of practice. There are many other things. Because of lack of time, I'm not explaining. I'm telling only these two examples here. And then when we come to our villages, all of you know this one, those who have visited or those are in Kerala. These home gardens, this is the typical land use systems of Kerala. There is a house in the center surrounded by plenty of plants, both cultivated plants and non-cultivated plants. You can see here, you can see coconut is there, and then on the border they have rubber, sometimes bamboo is also there, teak is cultivated, jackfruit trees will be there, mango will be there, banana will be there, and even some other horticulture crops will be there, and vegetables will be there, animal will also be there. That means animal husbandry will also be there. So this is a best example for an agroforestry systems where agriculture crops, fodder crops or animal and tree species are aggregated together to optimum utilization of natural resources. That means light and water and nutrients, and get optimum yield from different species. So this is a typical example what we are having in Kerala, and in other parts like even in Northeast India we can see, Sri Lanka we have, even other tropical countries we can see, but Kerala home gardens are well known for their diversity. So home gardens are a predominant traditional land use systems in the tropics, and here you can see an integration of trees, bamboos, shrubs, climbers and animals. And again, these are rich in plant diversity. For example, Krishnankutti has recorded about 14 tree species per home garden. And in from 80 home gardens, about 179 species were recorded by Dr. Jose. And from Thrissur, in 1 hectare area, I recorded 124 angiosperm species, flowering plant species, and among them 60 are tree species. The same way from Karnataka, 93 species were recorded from 1 hectare area. And again in Kerala, just from studying fences, home garden fences, I recorded about 68 plant species. And another interesting feature is not only edible fruit tree species, we also see many non-crop, means not cultivated edible fruit tree species from 25 coffee-based home gardens of Wayanad. So that means we recorded about 101 edible fruit tree species, and among them 46 are cultivated and 51 are not cultivated, but we can get edible fruits from such tree species. So this is the richness of diversity, or this one plant diversity in home gardens. The same way species richness are reported from other places also. For example, 200 cultivated species were recorded just from 0.25 acres in size. And then again, I already told you 179 species in home garden and 124 species in one home garden. And like that, you can see we have different this one. This is mainly because home gardens are perpetually experimenters and constantly trying and testing new species. They are actually considering their home garden as experimental or laboratory. So they bring different crops from friends and other people and plant them, and then see whether they grow very well and they yield. If they yield well, they will be maintained. So like that, the richness will continue to increase day by day because of home gardeners' interest. And then how people are managing such a large, diverse type of diverse plant association in home gardens or in agriculture system. That is we wanted to know. So here, these are all traditional what you call practices, where the home gardens and agriculture systems of India, they are all traditional practices, and naturally they will have traditional management practices also. So wherever we can see the traditional systems, and we can also expect traditional management practices. So I will explain with two examples, one by taking trees and other one is bamboos in home gardens or village ecosystems. You know, In Kerala and many other places, we don't use much inorganic fertilizers. We use green leaf for mulching. During September and October or post-monsoon period, what we do is we prune the branches of different tree species. We get leaves and small twigs, and they will be brought and spread around each tree, making a basin type of pit. In that pit, we put all these green leaf materials, and then over that we can put some cover dung, again some soil, then again leaf material, like that it will be put. They are this is a very important land use management, fertilizer use or nutrient management and water management. Because as I told you, this is post monsoon season. There will be the next season will be summer. We have to conserve the moisture in the soil, and this green leaf mulching will help to conserve water. And these leaves will release nutrient very slowly, not like inorganic fertilizers which will release a nutrient quickly and then vanish, but they release slowly, so thereby plants can absorb. So this is the system. This is a traditional method of soil management, water management in our land use systems. And for this, different species are being used. For example, this is called Ailanthus triphysa, matti. Then this is Kunnivaga, and this is Mullankaini and Mullumuriku. Then Chadachi, Vatta, Maradu, Irul. Like that, there are different species that they don't put the leaves of or the twigs of only one species. They usually collect the leaves and twigs from different species and put. This is because, for example, this Vatta will release potassium very quickly. But on the other hand, this species, Irul, it will release nitrogen quickly. So, but potassium slowly. So that means there will be slow release, synchronization of nutrient release with the plant absorption. That is the very basic science which people are following it. So, and this is very important science for managing soil and water nutrient. So here there are two types of pruning. One is no pruning. So that means you don't get any material. That will not be a good system for managing our crops. We have to go for minimum pruning, moderate pruning, or heavy pruning. The same way we can go for pruning every year or alternate years. What we did is we studied the effects of different pruning frequency and intensity regime of on tree health and green leaf manure production. See, this is mainly because of the discussion with the farmers, and farmers are telling that every year what you call you can prune Erythrina variegata, Mullu Muriku, and Vatta leaves about 50%. That means moderate pruning is good for the further growth of the tree. Otherwise, the tree will say, if you completely prune, 100% pruning means tree may not survive. So you can every year you can prune this species with a moderate level. But in the case of other species like Kunnivaga and Matti, then even Chadachi, you can go only for alternate years, not every year. If you do it every year, then these trees will die. The same way for alternate years, you can go for Erythrina and I think up to 75%. Here 50%, but here 75% you can go if you follow alternate year pruning. Then in case of Braidelia, they say you can harvest even up to 90% alternate years. And you can see I put some into mark here. That means these are not accepted. Whatever right mark is given, they are all traditional practices, and we also scientifically validated them. But we did not accept based on scientific study. This is correct. That means every year you cannot prune Terminalia panigmati leaves up to 50%. You can only prune alternate years. Okay, for about 75%, not this like that. So this kind of not this one. You can go only alternate years. You can go for this one. So what I'm telling you is pruning this. There is scientific validation for traditional practices of management of trees for green leaf manure, and some are not scientifically valid. It's natural because it is not written document. It is only coming from father to son and son to grandson like that. So while transferring on this kind of knowledge, there may be some kind of uh, mistakes or like that. So this will creep in. So that is why it is not completely scientifically validated, but most of them are scientifically validated. So pruning experiment indicated that the practices are generally scientifically valid with exceptions. So we can say like that. That means we have good traditional knowledge and practices which can be scientifically validated even now. Now I will take another example. This is bamboo. As you know, as I already mentioned, bamboo is one of the components of home gardens in Kerala, particularly in Palakkad district and in Malappuram district. Mainly they use it for agricultural purposes, different making implements and other things, quatta and other things, and also for fencing, beautiful fencing near at the time of Pongal season by January 15th. So here also we recorded many traditional practices and we tried to understand, is there any scientific vigor in this kind of traditional practices. One example I'm giving here, cultivation of bamboo in corner of bamboo in home garden. So that means they don't cultivate bamboo in the center or in somewhere here, but they manage bamboo in the corner. This is mainly because it will give freedom of movement for gardeners within the garden. Other area can be utilized for agriculture purposes. So that means more space will be available for other crops, and bamboo will be there in the in one of the corners of the home garden without troubling other crops and the movement of workers. Then there is another traditional practice of managing bamboo in home gardens. They make trench, leaving about 2 to 3 meter from the base of the bamboo clump, and they make a trench, and the soil will be put here. That means mounding will be done. So we asked why you are doing that. They are telling that this will restrict the horizontal spread of bamboo roots to other area. So that means there is no competition with other crops. So other crops will survive. Otherwise, no bamboo roots can spread to a larger distance, and they may also compete with other crops. That will be curtailed by having trenches. And then when you mount this one, the nutrient will be available, and you can get good number of new culms in the next season. So that means at the same because of soil fertility improvement. And another interesting feature we recorded from Palakkad is that they don't even waste these pits. Here they use this as cow dung pit. That means they daily put cow dung here. So that means it will become a place for putting cow dung. And as you know, because this cow dung, after few months, because of biological activity, it will be very hot. And then they will even kill the roots of bamboo this side. So the roots will not spread very easily to this area. Then another problem people are telling is if bamboo is there, there will be more shade for other crops and crops will not survive. So there is an answer in our traditional practices. That is detopping of culms. So once bamboo, as you know, bamboo within 1 month, it will reach its maximum height. Afterwards, there is no height increment, only girth increment or quality improvement will be there. So what our traditional farmers do is they just prune this part. They know that this tip portion is not strong, it will not fetch any money. Cannot be used for any work like poles and anything. You cannot use it. Only about 10 to 15 feet long poles are strong and they can be used for different purposes. So you manage that one. So you cut the above portion. Thereby there will be no competition for right between plants and bamboo and other crafts. And one more thing is, if you cut the tip portion, there will be more branch production because of cessation of axillary. There will be cessation of apical growth, and the hormones will come to the side branches, and this from the side branches will produce long branches. They will be used for fencing. Then another point I wanted to mention is, people say you cannot grow anything under bamboo. But again, this is not acceptable by our traditional practitioners, not only by our traditional practitioners, even by about 2000 years back, Khana from West Bengal, she is a daughter-in-law of Varaha Mihir. She told you can grow ginger and turmeric under bamboo. So she already, there is a called Khana Vachan or Khana Bachan in Bengali or in Oriya, and they say, and in there she mentioned that you can grow crops like ginger and turmeric under bamboo. And the same is the case with our farmers in Kerala, traditional farmers in Kerala. They say you can grow because there is a less impact on the yield of these crops, because you will have a raised beds of about 1 to 2 feet high, and in these raised beds you will grow this one. These are all short duration crops. Within 5 to 6 months you can harvest the crop, and before the roots of bamboo can spread to that area. So there is minimum or no root competition with bamboo, and you can harvest crops before that. And then no risk of damage to intercrops while cutting bamboo branches. Then I told you during January, people, mainly traditional farmers, go for cutting the branches of bamboo, mainly for decorating or mainly for fencing before Pongal. That is the off season, so they will have enough time for fencing work. They go for cutting bamboo branches and use for fencing. So before that, you can harvest these crops, because usually by June, July, you will sow the seed as the rhizomes of this one, and then by November, December, you can harvest it. By January, you can go for fencing work, and that means without damaging the crops. So these are all, and we have tested this in the field in Palakkad. We found that all these practices have scientific base. So I can conclude with a few points here. These sacred groves as green spaces in rural landscape perform several ecological, socio-cultural functions. They can also be a good model for urban green space development. That means, as you know, in urban area, we are losing our green spaces because of more construction, more industrial activity like that. Earlier, each urban area will have parks and other they are now reducing. But this is an example. This sacred grove is an example how even in such area we can have a rich plant diversity. So this will be a good model for development of urban green spaces, and we can develop new sacred groves. Or in some urban area, particularly in Kerala, we can see presence of old sacred groves. Almost they are not in good condition. They can be rejuvenated, and even we can recreate new sacred groves. So that is possible. Then many sacred groves are facing different kinds of threats. So we have an opportunity to investigate site-specific anthropogenic impacts on sacred groves for evaluating suitable conservation and management strategies. So this is for researchers. We can go to field and investigate what are the problems, why these sacred groves are getting depleted, both in quality and quantity. Now that kind of study can be undertaken, and we can identify the problems, threats, and also identify or evolve suitable conservation and management strategies. Then assessment of changing social behavior and perceptions of stakeholders of sacred groves. Again, another possibilities for research and development. So, as you know, the social behavior and perception is changing in almost all parts of the world, and this is actually affecting many of our traditional systems like sacred groves. So for preparing appropriate plans and strategies to revive favorable, so what we need to do is we have to revive the social behavior and perceptions which are favorable for conservation and management of sacred groves. That means we have to change the social behavior. The altered social changes behaviors are there. They have to be brought back to the original system. Thereby, we can manage our sacred groves. Then cultural heritage and forest vegetations are complementary to each other. So it is, if you go just for conservation of plants, people may not appreciate it. Both only when you go for managing both cultural heritage and vegetation, forest vegetation, then the sacred groves will be more, and they will be more healthy in terms of ecosystem aspects. So we have to manage, or we have to revive our cultural heritage, as well as we have to improve the forest vegetation in sacred groves. Again, there is a opportunity in the present day context. We can build and support institutions to strengthen the cultural heritage. It is not only to forest vegetation management, even for strengthening cultural heritage, we have to plan in each sacred grove. Then for each sacred grove, we need natural resource committees. We have our sacred grove, what you call management committee. Actually, they are actually planning or thinking only about managing temple and temple activities, and bringing more people and constructing some buildings like that. So that is the mentality of many sacred grove holders nowadays. So, but they are not thinking much about natural resource conservation. Both plants as well as ponds and other natural resources in sacred groves. So there must be a committee for natural resources, for natural resource conservation in each sacred grove. And at a national level, we should go for Indian National Network for Conservation of Sacred Groves, and that will help in both monitoring ecosystem services of sacred groves for research aspects, and also for developing good strategies for for revival of sacred groves and managing the existing sacred groves. When we come to agriculture system or agro ecosystems, as you already understood based on two examples, we have a wealth of traditional knowledge and practices for plant conservation, management, and utilization, and many are scientifically validated and still relevant. There is a scope for this kind of study, because there is very few studies on these aspects, or scientific validation of traditional knowledge and practices in our traditional in our country. So I think many students can go for this kind of activity. So we have given I gave only two examples. One is bamboo, and another one is tree management for green leaf manure cultivation. But there are many other traditional practices for plant conservation, management, and utilization. We have to understand them, we have to scientifically validate them, and also improve upon them. Then strengthening of traditional systems are required to maintain optimal combination of ecological and productive features of crop lands and support food and nutritional security. Because we have to tell this only traditional systems can help in supporting food and nutritional security. So we have to strengthen that one. And there is a scope for management innovation for improving traditional practices, because many based on our new what you call ideas and things, we can still further improve our traditional forest system with, but having that base, we can go for further innovation and improvement. Then we have rich hidden harvest in agricultural fields in the form of non-crop edible plants. There are more than 25 species I recorded from one home garden, like many chiras, what you call this spinach and other type, many what you call green vegetables, green vegetables and many edible fruits. They are there, and they have not been studied, and we can call them as hidden harvest, because we will not see then how they are going to give improve our economy, but they will give us food and also nutrition. And there is a scope for studying them, what is a compilation of non-crop edible plants in agriculture systems, and then their what you call the nutritional values can be studied, and also improvement can be made. So that means a comprehensive studies on these plants are required. In general, socio-economic and socio-cultural and technological factors decides inclusion of woody perennials. So we have to see how we can improve that one. And there is a scope for innovation, I already mentioned. So for all these things, what is important is we need a multidisciplinary approach. Sociologists, biologists, economists, anthropologists, agriculturists, forestry people, and so many other. So have to work together. It is not the work of only a biologist or a plant scientist. So everybody can contribute, because these are all providing us different ecosystem services. So we have to work together. So challenge is to develop a teamwork for together and to establish linkages among workers from different disciplines. So this is the challenge behind us, before us, and we have to work for that one. So thank you very much. So this is the photograph of a Bioresource Nature Park in Kerala Forest Sub-Center at Nilambur, where I am working now. I am talking now from this center now. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir. That was such a wonderful talk. It was very informative. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, sir. This group that you have just spoken to, I have to a little bit introduce you to the group. So they're a very diverse group of all PhD students. They're all doing their PhD in sustainable development.
Yes.
And there's about 20 students from Africa, another 4 from the Middle East. There's from the US, there are another group of people. There's some from Britain, some from Sri Lanka, and it's just a very diverse group. And so they're so this class was supposed to expose them to Indian culture and cultural traditions. And this is very very interesting. And also you touched upon how cultural practices are there. And I thought one of the first slides that you showed about how conservation takes place in terms of limited resource use and preserving. That was an amazing site. All in all, it's such a wonderful talk. So thank you again very much for this really exciting talk. And I'm sure that the students have a lot of questions and comments. I have questions also. I will definitely now allow the students first to ask their questions, and then and there is a request, and even I was going to ask you, is there any way that the slides that you have put together, is there any way that we can share the slides? You can share the slides with us.
So I can share. Some of them are from websites. Some are, so that can be avoided. But whatever I have, my slides, like for example this one in the bamboo, and I think these are my slides. Sure, I can share them. The other plants and things I can share.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much.
I can send it to you, and then you can decide.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And so now I will let the students ask their questions.
Yeah, fine.
So if anybody has a questions, you can either do a hand raise. So the first hand raise we have is Anushri. Anushri, go ahead. Anushri, before you ask your question, why don't you give a small what your topic is also about, so that sir will have an idea about that also.
Namaskar. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the presentation. It was really inspiring to see so much of work that you have done. My topic is basically around restoration of basically wetlands.
Okay.
Wetlands, actually not just wetlands, but also the you can say the landscape. So that includes the plants and the foliage and plantations around these wetlands system. And my case is for West Bengal area. So my
Okay, fine.
study area is in West Bengal. That is close to Sundarban.
Okay.
So my question, I have actually a lot of questions, but I think I can write
Keep to culture. Keep the questions towards culture, and then maybe you can write to sir directly about
Yeah,
anything.
you can send it to me by like we can communicate.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So one question was, as you mentioned, one thing which I really wanted to understand was how easy or difficult was it for you to find these traditional practices and this traditional culture coming together? That was one
Yeah.
very important question that I had.
Correct. Yeah.
And second question was, how are these sacred? Do you see any trends in these sacred groves in terms of their? How are they thriving on ground? Are they is the expanse for decreasing or is it increasing? That's two
Yeah.
questions which I had. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. The first question is understanding traditional practices in different places. It is through visiting villages and what we call participated rural appraisal technique. We have to adapt, and then we should be completely open. Okay, and we should not go with some what we call our answers and our this and like that. We should be like a ignorant person. We should go there and try to get information from them and think about it. The same thing happened in the case of bamboo. Okay, we went for some lesson and one person was explaining it. Then we thought, oh, why can't we study this one? So this kind of approach is the only way by which we can understand traditional practices. Then we can go for scientific studies. That is one thing. The second aspect you told about sacred growth in real ground. Yes, sacred growth like any other vegetative forest and other are facing threats because of increasing population and changing socio-economic and cultural features. But at the same time, in certain efforts are being made by different departments and agencies. For example, Medicinal Plant Board, National Medicinal Plant Board, it is funding for many sacred groves, for managing sacred groves, because there are many medicinal plants there. And so that way it is there. The same way MOI program is there. And there is a big program by biodiversity cell of Kerala Forest Department for financially supporting many sacred groves for protecting them. So that kind of, it's a national program, and as a part of that one, Kerala is doing that one. So that kind of effort is there, and it should be continued. Yeah. Otherwise, there will be a problem, both in terms of number and quality. Many are depleting. Yeah. I hope I explained you also. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. I think I can call the next person is Devashish. Is it okay, Anushri? I can move to the next person. The next person is
Yes.
Devashish. Okay, thank you. Devashish, again, please make sure that your questions are focused on culture, and you can feel free to write to sir about anything that is more technical than that.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Thank you very much. Dr. Chandrasekhar, it's such a wonderful time here. It's I can't tell you how blessed I feel listening to your talk. My question was, how, because with the changing ways of the world, I was wondering, even cultural systems are also taking a turn of things. For example, with the advent of modernity and urban cultures,
Yes.
we are currently seeing an amalgamation of our traditional practices, because we realize that we cannot do away with turmeric, we cannot do away with garlic, ginger, and so many things. You see the fad of organic things coming in, and it's so much related to our roots, our own culture, but the modern culture is also coming in, so we cannot avoid that. So in this scenario, what would be the good ways to develop that human nature connect, so that that can be also part of our traditions? It will be, it can be part of our education systems, it can be part of our social cultural systems and other things. Are there some ideas that people have done some experiments? Because I saw the park that is put up on the screen right now. It is such an exemplary system of what I am trying to think. Please share if you have some other thoughts, ideas, or maybe memories on this. Thank you very much.
Yes, as you mentioned, because of changing social setup, we are losing many our traditional practices and bioresources. But at the same time, now there's a we have to stand up now. Those who are in this field, we have to stand up and then study and then highlight the importance of these things. And like, for example, because of this COVID-19 problem, now people are going for many medicinal plants or the herbal medicine. So the same way I told you, this sacred groves, how they are important in terms of managing biodiversity, and then how they can be used for developing bioresources, or what you call urban green spaces. So we have to highlight such zone, we have to study them, we have to tell their scientific vigor, and for even for future. If we lose this one, we are losing many things. That kind of more studies are required. And as you also mentioned, that we have to in our education system, it should be incorporated, and we have to teach our children the importance of our traditional practices and resource management. In the same way, as you mentioned this about this garden, in this garden we have Rashi and Nakshatravana. It is just to explain, Rashi and Nakshatravana. That means we have 27 nakshatras in this one, stars, birth stars, and 12 grahas or rashis. And for each one tree is assigned, and each one is medicinally important. We have this in this garden, we have a Rashivana and Nakshatravana. This is mainly to explain to the people the wisdom of our ancestors to conserve biodiversity and sustainably use plant diversity, and in the by assigning this kind of person, because once you say this is your birth star tree, then certainly you will manage it. So or you will plant it when a child born. So this concept will remain. So this is a way in which we have to popularize or make understand the importance of our traditional practices and management systems.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. That is actually a very interesting point also that you brought out, that the relationship between a particular person and how they encourage pro-environmental behavior by linking different trees to different birth stars and the zodiac. Wonderful. So the next person I would call on, next person who raised their hand is Amritesh AR. So Amritesh, again, would you make sure that your question is related to the cultural aspect?
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Hi, sir. It was really an insightful presentation, sir. Thank you so much for the presentation. And also, sir, the remarkable research you have done to protect our nature. It's hats off to you, sir. Then coming to my question, sir, first of all, you were telling about for rejuvenating these sacred groves. So whether do government provide some incentives if some of the sacred groves are no one to take care, so government will take up or some other plans for that? That is one question, sir. Then second one is, there is some procedure, sir. If someone want to create a new sacred grove, some procedure is there to create a new sacred grove. If say a sort of place is there, then we need to create a new sacred grove. Some kind of information from you, sir, for how to create a new sacred grove.
Okay. Yes, the first question is incentive. Yes, there are many schemes, as I already mentioned, both by National Medicinal Plant Board as well as by our Ministry of Environment and Forest. And even, of course, Kerala Forest Department is having some. And they give mainly for some kind of protection and this one, not for construction of any building and things, only to protect vegetation, the fund will be available. And you can approach National Medicinal Plant Board as well as Kerala Forest Department, mainly biodiversity cell. And it is being done. Even last year we went to some of the sacred groves for because fund has been given to them, just to want to know whether they are managing it properly like that. Just for examining, we went there. So this is happening, and that way still work is going on and support is coming from different agencies. The second one is the establishment or recreation or the creation of a sacred grove. I don't know anything about any procedure or like that, but what I feel is usually in a sacred grove, there are 3 or 4 components. One is a water pond, the second one is plants, and third one is, of course, temple or that kind of sacred feature that will be there. So, but I think that can be, and then the plants. Once you visit the nearby sacred groves or nearby forest, you will know which plant will be suitable for that area, and they can be planted. And then, of course, pond will be required for providing water and things. So like that, it is possible to create a sacred grove. And you in a place like Kerala, we don't need even planting. You just protect it and manage it. Naturally, many plants will come, and many of them are the species which we see in our sacred groves. So that way, it is possible to develop it, and then you protect it. I think this is what I can explain in this point.
Thank you so much, sir. Ma'am was telling about to share my topic also. So my topic is on, sir, a study on socio-cultural and environmental aspects of management of village protected areas in India.
Oh, good. Yeah, very good. Yeah, in India.
Yes, yes. Actually, I have selected the village as Orissa.
Orissa. Okay, fine. Right. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yeah. So I think when you visit villages, and even better, you collect some information from Khana Bachan, this one also. Sure. I mentioned, because she has given plenty of what you call examples how to manage biodiversity in villages like that. Okay. She has given it. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir.
Welcome.
Amritish, you can always reach out to Debashish. He is from Orissa. So maybe you can touch base with him and ask him to help you. The next person I would call is Amabil. Do you have a question?
Yes, Professor. Yes. My topic is value addition to underutilized plant products through phytochemical studies.
Okay.
So I was just wondering, because right now, it's very common in most institutions. Scientists are at work trying to find out the important phytochemicals that can assist in various ways, such as the medicinal value, nutritional value, and so on. So I was just wondering how culture believes in terms of sacred groups to try to harmonize with the scientific outputs as well as the results that are obtained from the plants, how does culture beliefs harmonize with the scientific perspective?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yes, as I told you, we have a rich plant diversity in sacred groves, and many are having medicinal values. And at the same time, not only above ground vegetation, even below ground vegetation, what I say, for example, fungi, they are also rich in sacred groves. And certainly studies can be undertaken to understand the phytochemicals of these species. Many of these species have not been studied also, and they can be identified and they can be studied for their phytochemical aspects, for how they can be used for what you call health management. So this is what I can explain you. There is possibility. It's a plenty. There is a lot of scope in this field. Whether my
Okay,
answer
thank you
is
so much.
yeah.
Yes, it's clear. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
And thank you, sir. And last is the person last on the list is Rondine. And if there is time permits, I would like to also ask a question after she is done. So Rondine, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bhavani. Dr. Chandrasekhar, thank you so much for your presentation and for sharing your knowledge with us. And not only that, but telling us what are the areas that are ripe for research and intervention and getting some aid. So thank you very much. It's very thoughtful to include that aspect. Like one of my colleagues said, I love this picture that you're displaying. And I really now feel, since you've said that this is astrologically based, I really feel that I must visit this garden. But that's an aside.
Please.
My research is based on spirituality and sustainability in water management. But the focus, yes, so the focus is on rivers. So I was wondering what you may have seen that is akin to sacred groves, but along riverbanks for river restoration, if you're seeing any movement in that trend, and where you would see that most happening. So I know that there's a lot of talk about freshwater mangroves that people plant, some groves in that area. I don't know if you have any information on that to share with me.
Freshwater ponds in sacred groves are no, it's not clear for me. Will you please tell me again?
Sorry, I know that sacred groves are mostly inland sort of temples and properties.
Yes,
but what would be akin to sacred groves but along river banks? That is the same concept.
Yes. No, along river banks, yes, we have many sacred groves in Kerala and Karnataka. And for example, even what is that place in near Kollam? There is a big lake. I forgot its name in Kollam.
Shastangota Lake?
Yes, Shastangota. Yes. A very adjacent to that one, we have sacred groves. So like that, yeah. So there are many associated with rivers and ponds. We have these sacred groves.
Okay, good. I'll have to look into those, especially the one nearby in Kollam. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Namah Shivaya.
Thank you, sir. Sir, now I have a question, sir, that I want to ask you. So I remember you showed us the picture of the Theyyam dancers.
Yes.
And you were saying about how they actually were also involved in actually solving social problems and questions that came up. So I had this question that I remember seeing actually one of those question answers or something like that in some context. I don't remember what it was right now, but I also realized that these dancers, they also embodied the natural resources. They spoke for the rivers, they spoke for the forest. They would actually embody the spirits of natural resources and gave a voice to the natural resources. So we have this thing right now where you have, there is a recent trend where you are giving legal status to a river. But in some way, this was a part of our culture in the sense to give a voice to the natural resources or to embody them somehow. I would like you to speak a little bit on that side, because it's also to show how culture and ecology are so closely related in Indian cultures.
Yes.
You would comment on that.
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. Yes. Yeah. So I heard what they are telling. Actually, in many places they are talking about you should not waste, even put waste materials in the rivers like that. They are telling, and because of that one you are facing all this problem like that. They are explaining, and then even the agriculture also don't use much more water. Like different depending upon the situation, they are explaining how to sustainably conserve and manage and utilize resources, they are telling. And even why people are not allowing, particularly women in olden days. I'm not completely this one, but inside the forest of sacred groves, only few, because if we go inside, we start collecting materials. We will harvest, we will cut trees mainly for fuel wood and things like that. That is why it is restricted. So you will be allowed only to go to temple, not to the forest area of the sacred grove. Only in certain days you can go there, and all the materials will be used only for temple purposes. That is there. The same way as you mentioned, in Theyyam, of course, I have not studied in greater detail. I don't know much about Theyyam in greater detail, but certainly they are talking about the complete, what do you call, the wealth of the village, how we should be managed. That is there, yeah.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else? Debashish, your hand is still up. I'm not sure if you still have a question or you forgot to bring.
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to put it down. I'm sorry.
All right. Is there anybody else who has a question or would like to ask sir any other question? Sir, I think there is a lot of people who are actually doing their research around, and they would be definitely looking into traditional practices around pro-environmental behaviors, protecting forest resources and things like that. So if I don't know, I'm sure you're very busy, and but if there's any way that the students can reach out to you for any kind of
no problem. They can contact me, so I can give whatever I can extend my help whatever way it's possible.
Wonderful, sir. And sometime when the lockdown is done, I would invite you to please come and visit us here at Amrita in person. I will arrange things for you. That would be the most wonderful.
I love to visit your place and listen.
Have you
and
been?
Also I request you to visit this place in Nilambur. So
yes.
Okay.
I think once all the students are here, now they're all over the world. That's why we had the program so late at night. Maybe once everybody is here, we can make a planned trip and we can all come to the gardens and visit you.
Sure. Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Very grateful for your time.
Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you so much. Very, very interesting. Very enjoyable. I learned so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It was very nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Truly appreciate.
Wonderful.
Okay, bye. Yeah. See you. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.